Hello there, welcome back to my channel, Food with Ben. This week we're going to do sorbets. It's been very hot here in Texas and I wanted to do something sweet and fruity, and I couldn't really eat too much dairy because I'm also lactose intolerant. So sorbets were a really good choice for me. Whenever you look up strawberry sorbets, the first thing you'll see is King Arthur, and I decided to go with that recipe. Plus it had two ways of doing it, one with the ice cream maker and one without the ice cream maker. But there's also the New York Times and Tasty one, which are both good recipes, and I'll have them linked down below. So fun fact is strawberries aren't really considered true berries in a botanist sense, in that their name comes as derived from the fact that they used to be grown on beds of straws, but now on to the recipe. Most sorbets recipe is about a pound of fruit to about a cup of sugar, and this one included corn syrup for the ice cream maker version, water and lemon juice for both of them, just to add a little bit more volume, but that is it. Pretty simple and pretty easy to make. So the King Arthur recipe is a little bit different because it makes you make a simple syrup, and that's just equal parts sugar and water, 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of water, and you heat it up until all of it dissolves. You can also just mix it until all of it dissolves. It just takes more effort and doesn't sterilize it, so it doesn't last as long. I think the reason why King Arthur does this is so you can create more volume of sorbet in the long run. Almost all the recipes will tell you to blend it up in a food processor, and I just had a hand blender, so that's one I use. And then this one requires you to strain out the seeds because it was a textural thing. You don't have to do this, and because it does take a while to do this process. But if you do it, it does create this nice layering effect if you do it over the simple syrup. But then you just add in your 1/4 cup of lemon juice and 1/4 cup of corn syrup, mix it all together, throw it in the fridge, and let it chill for an hour or overnight. I did overnight because that made it completely cold. Onwards to the next recipe. So this is the one without the ice cream maker. The King Arthur recipe still follows the simple syrup idea, but if you don't want to do that, you can do the New York one or the Tasty recipe. But my recommendation is the way that you can modify that to bring out more of the flavor of your fruit is just put sugar on top of your fruit and let it sit there for about 30 minutes to an hour, and it really brings out the flavor, and you'll see a lot more juice come out before you blend it. The reason why you want to do this technique called maceration, and it helps bring out your flavor. I still recommend adding in your lemon juice and mixing it all together, and then blending it up and putting it into a sheet pan. It doesn't matter how big the pan is, but the longer and wider the pan is, the faster it'll freeze. This is what happens within 2 minutes. You can still see that I get pretty good chunks from the middle, and you want to mix it all up and break it apart because you're trying to create the same technique as a ice cream maker, but just over a long period of time and a more manual labor over time. You do that, throw it back in the freezer, and another 2 hour or 2 back in, and you can tell the texture has changed again because we broke it apart. And I thought, well, let's do that again, but instead use a high pressure blender. And that's what a lot of recipes will recommend you do, is to freeze it once in a long sheet pan, break it apart, freeze it, and then blend it again to create the most smooth texture, because your goal is to try to create as close as a texture you want to a ice cream maker. You can't always get it, but it still works out pretty well. So the texture is actually more like a soft serve, but you can tell it's a lot smoother than it was before. And now you want to throw it in the freezer and let it chill overnight. All right, so now back to the ice cream maker version of it. You just need to follow the ice cream maker directions. I did not, and I actually poured a little bit too much liquid inside of it, but that was okay because it worked out overall, so it wasn't too much overflowing at the end. So within 5 minutes, you can already tell that the ice cream maker is working. You're getting these nice frozen chunks. That was the idea of bringing out the edges to the inside of your pan for the non-ice cream maker one, is trying to replicate this same process. This is what it looks like within 10 minutes. And then this is what it looks like within 15 minutes, and then it already started moving on and processing. By the last 20 minutes, it was like this. This is what 20 minutes is. Still not really smooth. You still see really visible big chunks. And then 30 minutes, you can tell it's a lot smoother. And you can see that mine overflowed a little bit, but that's okay because it didn't spill over, which is the main concern. So you can tell that the ice cream maker one is a lot smoother, and there's a lot more to it, actually, a lot more volume, because that's how the ice cream maker works. But part of the smoothness also comes from the corn syrup. So that's why if you want to, you can add a little bit of corn syrup to your recipe of the non-ice cream version of this, non-ice cream maker version. But if you don't want to, that's fine, because you want to lower the amount of sugar you intake. I actually got about a quart in a pint, which is really nice, and so that means I had a lot to share with friends. You actually need this to freeze for another 2 to 3 hours to solidify, but your patience will be rewarded. Alright, so let's try these. So the first one I am trying is the ice cream maker version of it. And yeah, you can tell it's still melting a little bit. It's not the fully developed in terms of it, but I really wanted to try it. And it's still fantastic. It clings, it has a more smooth texture, and that's definitely from the corn syrup, but it tastes fantastic. And honestly, you can probably add in a little bit less than the recipe says, maybe like 2 tablespoons of corn syrup, and you still be perfectly fine with that texture. But now let's talk about the non-ice cream maker version of this, and it still has a nice gloss to it. This was defrosted about 10 minutes. Honestly, if you let it defrost to 15, it even let dissolve some of the more ice crystals, so it's less crunchy. It's still pretty smooth, but you can still feel the ice chunks inside of it. Still really good. Not as sweet, of course, because there's not as much sugar. If you want to add a little bit more, you can always add in the teaspoon of corn syrup, but you can also do the maceration, and that really brings out the flavor of strawberries. And it also helps you not have as much sugar, because you don't need as much sugar when you're doing that if you're trying to lower the intake of your sugar. But both are really good recipes. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and comment on anything I should try. I'm always down to try anything. If you like what you saw, subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at foodwbin. You can also check out my other videos right here. I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye, y'all.